They call me the kind lady of Willow Creek, but if my neighbors could truly see through these faded blue eyes, they would never sleep again. My name is Grace Lambert. At 73, my skin is etched by the sun, but my soul is scarred by what I witnessed at the Hawthorne house. I remember Emily as a child, bright, curious, full of light. But when she returned to this town at 29, that light hadn't just dimmed. It had been hunted. She looked elegant, yet so fragile that a whisper could shatter her. But it wasn't the weariness in her hollow green eyes that terrified me. It was the shadow trailing behind her. Because in this town, we know, once that entity marks a bloodline, it doesn't stop until the last of them is cold in the ground. I should have said more. I should have explained better what that house has done to generations of her family. But how can you look at someone and say, the house where you grew up calls out to the living, using the voice of the dead? Everyone in Willow Creek knew something was wrong with the Hawthorne house. It was an old building with dark wood, narrow windows, and walls that always seemed damp, as if they were breathing. The peeling paint revealed layers of time. Each plank creaked as if it were guarding a secret. The whole place seemed awake. I remember Emily's grandfather, Arthur Hawthorne, a tall, thin man with a short white beard and restless eyes. He was the kind of person who always seemed on the verge of saying something important, but never did. In the last months before he died, he would shuffle his feet across the porch, gazing out into the woods with a silent terror I've never forgotten. When Emily returned to take care of family matters, I saw her get out of the car with that dejected look, wearing a brown coat that seemed too big for her. She greeted me politely, unaware that I was trembling just watching her approach that place. I tried to warn her. I swear I tried. But she smiled as if I was just being superstitious. Perhaps I should have been firmer. Perhaps I should have held her arm and said that this house doesn't lose anyone. It just waits. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because, after what happened to Emily, I know my name might be the next one that thing calls. And before that happens, someone needs to know the truth. I realized Emily had arrived long before I heard the car pull up. In Willow Creek, when anything related to the Hawthorne house moves, it seems the air changes first. The street becomes quieter. People look out their windows, unable to explain why. It was like that afternoon. The sky was overcast, and the fog was already descending down the road, covering the entrance to town like a veil. Willow Creek is small and cozy for those just passing through. But for those of us who have lived here for decades, there are stories that don't appear in tourist brochures. And the Hawthorne house is the first of them. A place that should be just another old building, but which carries a kind of silence that doesn't belong to this world. When Emily walked down the main street, I was in the cafe. I saw through the window the exact moment when some residents recognized the last name printed on the property deed. The same one the local real estate agent had mentioned months before. People stopped talking. Two ladies exchanged glances, one of them clutching the crucifix she wore around her neck. One of the young men at the gas station simply turned his face away. No one greeted her. No smiles. Just that heavy silence that speaks volumes more than any words. I decided to go back home and wait on the porch. When she parked in front of the family home, I was already there. Emily stood still in the car for a few seconds, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, as if gathering the courage to get out. When she finally got out, I could see better. The tiredness on her face, the deep, dark circles under her eyes, the way she looked at the house. It wasn't nostalgia. It was unease. It was as if something inside her knew that returning there wasn't a good idea. The Hawthorne house was exactly as I remembered it. The dark, damp wood, with cracks that looked like veins. The dirty windows, with old curtains hanging like mourning cloths. The peeling paint revealed old layers of color, as if time had accumulated there in the form of scars. The stairs creaked whenever the wind passed. The whole place seemed alert. I crossed the street to greet her, trying to keep my voice steady, but my attention was immediately drawn to the front door, ajar. I was absolutely certain it had been closed a few days before. I checked myself. Emily noticed after me and tried to justify it, saying the wood must have given way. But I already knew. That house doesn't open because of the weather. It opens when someone who belongs to that bloodline returns. And at that moment, I realized that the house had sensed her presence long before I had. As I watched Emily at the front door, trying to unlock the door as if it were just a normal routine, flashes of the past began to come back to me. Small details that, at the time, didn't make sense, but that today seemed like pieces of a puzzle I ignored out of fear. I remember when Emily was a child and used to play in the backyard. She was always a quiet, observant girl, but there was something that bothered me. Sometimes she would suddenly stop in the middle of playing and stare out the second-story window, that hallway window that never had any light. Even during the day, it seemed like she saw something that no one else saw. When I asked her what she was looking at, she always said the same thing: nothing. I think I heard someone call me. At the time, I thought it was just a child's imagination. We children here grow up hearing stories of miners' ghosts, forest creatures, and the spirits of former residents. But her expression didn't seem like imagination. It seemed like recognition, as if she were trying to remember who had called her. And then there was her grandfather, Arthur. Before he died, he started acting strangely. He used to wake up in the middle of the night and walk around the yard, mumbling slurred words, as if he were answering someone. Once I asked him what was going on, and he replied with a tired, humorless smile, "She's calling me again." I asked who she was, but he just turned his face away and went inside, as if he had revealed too much. And there's more. There was a period when Emily was very ill. Nothing serious, just constant fevers, as if it were something emotional. Her mother, desperate, told me that Emily talked in her sleep every night, repeating a phrase that no one understood properly because it sounded garbled, like a whisper. But one time, when I was taking care of her, I heard it more clearly. "Don't answer." It was as if the child was trying to warn herself about something she couldn't remember while awake. I never told Emily this. I never said that. Years ago, when she had a high fever, she sat up in bed in the middle of the night, looked down the dark hallway and whispered, "I know you're there." At the time, I convinced myself it was delusional. But now, seeing her return to that house after so long, that old feeling came back. The same feeling I had when her grandfather died. That it hadn't just been a heart attack, as the whole town believed. It was as if the house was picking up where it left off. On the first night, I already knew I wouldn't sleep well. I stayed at home on the porch, with the living room light on and the curtains slightly open, just enough to see the Hawthorne's facade. I told myself it was just old-fashioned worry, that Emily was an adult, that nothing would happen. But when you live with certain things for too long, you learn to recognize when the atmosphere changes. It was nearly 11 when I saw the light in the upstairs bedroom turn on. That same room where, years ago, I had seen her grandfather spend hours sitting on the edge of the bed, staring down the dark hallway. The curtain moved slowly. For a second, I thought Emily would appear, perhaps opening the window to let in some air. But no one came. I stared for a few more minutes. The house was too quiet. Not a shadow moved. No silhouette crossed the window. Only that light, fixed, like an open eye in the middle of the night. I was just about to close my curtains and force my mind to rest when I heard it. It didn't come from the street. It didn't come from inside my house. It came from the house next door. A voice, low, drawn out, calling out, "Emmy, lie!" It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a loud echo. It was almost a sigh, but so clear I couldn't mistake it. It was as if someone were leaning very close to the wall, murmuring through the wood. At that moment, I felt my heart race. I knew what that sounded like. Years before, I had heard a very similar call coming from that same house, and back then it wasn't Emily's name. It was her grandfather's name. I stood there paralyzed, waiting, hoping it was my imagination. But a few seconds later, the voice repeated, a little clearer, like someone insisting when their attention is ignored. "Emmy, Lee." And then the light in the room went out. I gripped the edge of the curtain so tightly my fingers ached. I don't know how long I stood there, motionless, afraid to see anything approaching the window. The only thing I could think was, she can't answer. For God's sake, she can't answer. The next morning, I went to Emily's house very early. I hadn't slept well after what I'd heard. I waited for any sign of movement, any shadow at the window. When I saw the kitchen light turn on, I took a deep breath and crossed the street, trying to choose the right words. I knew that if I said too much, she would think I was freaking out. But if I said too little, maybe she would end up making the same mistake as her grandfather. Emily opened the door with a sleepy expression and a coffee in her hand. She tried to smile, but the smile died at the corner of her mouth, as if she had spent the entire night restless. "Are you okay?" I asked. I guess I just haven't slept much. I heard some noises in the house. You know those old wooden things? She said that trying to sound calm, but I recognized her discomfort. That kind of noise only fools someone who doesn't know the history of the house. I went inside and sat with her at the kitchen table. The house felt colder inside than outside. The smell of damp wood was the same as years ago. Emily stirred her coffee distractedly, as if trying to clear her head. That's when she blurted out, "I thought I heard someone calling me in the middle of the night," very softly. Have you ever heard that coming from around here? My blood ran cold. I took a deep breath. I needed to choose my words carefully. I couldn't give everything away at once. "Emily, this house has a history. I'm not going to lie to you. And it's not a good history. Before you were born, your grandfather was already talking about things he heard in here." She frowned, resting her hands on the table. "My mother never mentioned any of that. She didn't mean to scare you," I replied. "And maybe she thought you'd grow up without having to come back here." Emily was silent for a moment, staring down the dark hallway that led to the bedrooms. I saw the exact moment she swallowed hard, as if recognizing something, an old, almost forgotten impression. "Grace," she began hesitantly. "When I was little, sometimes I dreamed that someone was calling me from upstairs, but I never remembered it afterwards. Except last night, I heard it again, exactly the same, as if the voice was on the other side of the wall." My heart started beating faster. That was exactly what had happened with her grandfather. The same progression, the same closeness. "Emily, listen to what I'm about to tell you," I said, holding her hand. "Don't answer, regardless of what you hear. Even if the voice seems familiar, even if it sounds like someone you know or someone you've lost. Don't answer." She looked at me with confusion and fear combined. "Why? What happens if I answer?" I hesitated. That was the part I never wanted to say. "Because that's how your grandfather started to change," he replied. Emily turned pale as if she had received an invisible punch to the stomach. "Answer what, Grace? What lives here?" I didn't have the courage to tell the whole truth, nor did I fully understand it myself. "I don't know the name of the thing," I partially lied. "What I do know is that it talks as if it were someone from the family." Emily looked away, and at that moment, for the first time, I saw real terror in her eyes, a fear that didn't stem from superstition but from memory, a fear she recognized. After our conversation in the kitchen, Emily tried to act as if nothing was happening, as if it were all just accumulated tiredness, stress, hazy childhood memories. It was clear she was clinging to the only explanation that still kept everything under control, and I didn't blame her for it. When the impossible begins to affect our lives, the first reaction is always denial. During the afternoon, she spent hours cleaning the rooms, opening stuck windows, removing old sheets that covered dusty furniture. I watched some of this from the balcony, pretending to tend to my plants. The way she moved around the house seemed unsettling, as if each room were observing her presence, as if the air grew heavier when she crossed a threshold. That night, she decided to sleep in her childhood room. She said she wanted to reconnect with her memories, to deal with everything in a practical way. I knew it was just a way of trying to deny her fear. The house doesn't deny anything, it just waits. Around 9 o'clock, Emily sent me a short text message. "I think I'll go to bed early tonight. Thank you for everything, Grace." I replied that I would stay awake if she needed me. But as the night wore on, the silence between us grew strange. It wasn't the natural silence of two neighbors sleeping. It was a silence, attentive, a silence that seemed to fill the entire street. And when that kind of silence falls over Willow Creek, It's almost always because of that house. Around midnight, I heard footsteps coming from her room. Light, hesitant footsteps, and then the creaking of the bed, as if someone had sat up slowly. I thought about going over there, but I forced myself to stay quiet. The last thing I wanted was to scare her even more. But then I heard something worse. A muffled sound, almost like a gasp. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't a word. It was a presence. A presence that came not with violence, but with patience. The house was testing her. The next morning I asked if she had slept well. Emily tried to laugh. "It's just the old house. It's always been noisy, hasn't it?" But as he said this, his hands trembled slightly as he held the coffee cup. She knew something had happened, something she didn't want to admit. "Did you hear that again?" I asked. Emily looked away. "No, I didn't hear anything." And then, after a second, I think the truth is, she was trying to fight against her own memory, trying to rationalize what was irrational, trying to ignore what the house was calling her. But I'd seen this before. This is how it begins. First, the person tries to ignore it, then try to understand. And then she realizes that she's not the one looking for answers. It's home. From the third day on, it became impossible to pretend nothing was happening. Emily tried to maintain her routine, vacuuming, sorting her mother's documents, measuring the rooms for the renovation. But the house wouldn't let her. It was as if each wall was more alert. Each floor creaked intentionally, as if the old wood were responding to her movements. That afternoon, I was on my balcony when I heard a loud crash coming from inside the Hawthorne house. Something heavy had fallen. Emily ran out to the door, startled, her eyes wide. I went over there immediately. "Emily, what was that?" I asked. She was breathing rapidly, trying to explain. I was in my mother's room. The ceiling fan fell, but it fell straight down, Grace. It didn't wobble. It didn't come loose, little by little. It just plummeted, as if someone had pushed it. We looked together at the hole in the ceiling. There were no cracks around it, no signs of structural wear. It hadn't fallen. It had been ripped out. I saw her hands trembling, but she tried to smile, as she always did when she was scared. It must just be rust. But we both knew it wasn't rust. That night, things got worse. Around 11 o'clock, I was getting ready for bed, when I heard a sound I hadn't heard in years. 3 slow, spaced-out knocks on the wall, separating my house from hers. It was the same knocking pattern her grandfather had started hearing before he completely changed. As if something were testing the boundaries, I stopped completely. The sound came back again. 3 knocks, equally slow, equally deliberate. I grabbed my coat, went outside, and looked out the windows at Emily's room. The room was dark, but there was movement. A shadow passing near the curtain, going back and forth, as if someone were pacing restlessly. I thought about knocking on the door, but something stopped me. An ancient instinct. The certainty that, if I called for her at that moment, it could cause something worse. The next morning, Emily opened the door before I rang the doorbell. "I didn't sleep," she said. My heart ached. "What happened?" She put her hand to her face, took a deep breath and said, "In the middle of the night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. First slow, then faster. I thought it might be an animal, but, Grace, the footsteps stopped at my bedroom door, and they stayed there." "Did you see anything through the crack?" I asked, almost voicelessly. "No, and that's what made it worse, because I felt like someone was on the other side. It wasn't wind. It wasn't creaking wood. It was a presence." I lay there in bed, praying it was my imagination, but, Grace, then I heard it. Again, that whisper. My blood ran cold. "The name?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, much clearer this time." Emily began to cry. It wasn't noisy despair. It was the kind of quiet, restrained crying of someone who realizes they are losing their own sense of security. "Why is this happening to me?" he murmured. I meant to tell the truth. He meant that the house doesn't choose by chance, that it responds to blood, to lineage, to what was left behind by the grandfather and the mother. But all I could say was, "Because he knows you're here." At a certain point, you can even doubt a whisper, a strange footstep, a shadow in the hallway. The human mind is good at making excuses, Tiredness, stress, old memories, imagination. But there are things that simply cannot be explained. It happened on a drizzly afternoon. The sky was gray, and the Hawthorne house seemed even darker than usual. I had gone there to help Emily sort through some of her mother's papers. We scattered cardboard boxes around the living room, filled with papers, old photos, receipts, and yellowed letters. The house was silent, except for the distant sound of rain pattering on the roof. While we were rummaging through things, Emily found a smaller, older box stored at the back of the living room cupboard. It had no label, just a faded ribbon holding the lid together. "I've never seen that box before," she commented. "Perhaps it belonged to your grandfather," I replied. She placed the box on the table and opened it slowly. Inside there were some folded letters, an old photo of the house, much newer, with light-colored paint, and a small portable cassette tape recorder, one of those with large, dusty buttons. "Do you think this still works?" Emily asked, turning the device over in her hands. "There's only one way to find out," I replied. She found batteries in another drawer, inserted them into the compartment, and pressed the play button. At first, we only heard hissing, that deep, irregular noise of an old tape. I was about to say it must be damaged when a voice emerged from the noise. It was her grandfather's voice. "The day, October 15th, 2:15 in the morning," he said, his voice tired but recognizable. "The house called again." I looked at Emily. She remained motionless. The recording continued. Arthur was breathing deeply as if he were afraid even to speak. "She uses Mary's voice sometimes. Sometimes she sounds like Emily, even when she's sleeping in the next room. I know she's not my family, but she knows how to imitate. She knows how to use what I love against me." Emily gripped the recorder so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "I tried to ignore it," Arthur's voice continued, "but over time the voice gets closer, as if it's coming down the wall, as if it's entering my room. Today it called 3 times. I don't know what will happen if I answer. I don't know how much longer I can pretend I don't hear it." And then we listened. Amidst the hissing of the tape, another voice, lower, drawn out, almost blending into the noise, emerges. "Arthur!" I felt every hair on my body stand on end. It wasn't normal interference. It wasn't a tape malfunction. It was a voice that seemed to be inside the room, not just on the recording. The strangest thing was that when that voice came, the light in the room flickered, just once, but it was enough. Emily pressed the pause button immediately. We both stood in silence for a few seconds, listening only to the rain outside. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I heard," I replied. "And it wasn't from the street." She rewound for a few seconds and pressed play again. Her grandfather's voice, the story, the hissing sound. But the other voice didn't come. That drawn-out call was simply gone, as if something had been said at that moment, not in the recording. Emily dropped the recorder on the table, took 2 steps back, and brought her hands to her mouth. "This isn't normal, Grace. This isn't. This can't just be the old house." I didn't answer, because deep down, I'd known for many years that it wasn't just a house. And for the first time since she returned, I saw in her eyes not just fear, but the silent acceptance that something impossible was happening, something that did not come from the world of the living. After the recording, Emily didn't go into the room where we'd left the box for days. She kept herself busy with small things, cleaning drawers, reviewing documents, sorting her mother's clothes. But every step she took inside the house felt heavier, as if she were always walking through a fraught field. And I felt the same way from the outside. Something inside was awake. At the end of the week, Emily called me saying she'd found something in the attic. The Hawthorne's attic had always been a place nobody liked to go. Not even her grandfather went in alone after a while. The low ceiling, the musty smell, the wood that seemed to throb with the dampness. But still, there had been boxes up there for decades. We went upstairs together. The attic light flickered, as if struggling to stay lit. Emily pushed some boxes aside until she pulled out a larger, heavier one, sealed with old duct tape. On the lid, written in slanted handwriting, "Hawthorne, 1887. This is from the time of my mother's great-great-grandfather," Emily murmured. We opened it slowly. Inside were old documents, contracts, letters, 2 almost faded photos, and a diary. The leather was cracked, the cover almost falling apart. Emily opened it carefully. The diary belonged to Jonathan Hawthorne, a direct ancestor of the family. The first few pages talked about daily life, the weather, crops, the growth of the city. But as we progressed, the writing changed. The sentences were getting shorter, the words more trembling. And then, on one of the most damaged pages, we found this. The voice returned tonight. It is not human. She knows my name. You know, my children's. You know, those who haven't been born yet. Emily swallowed hard. We've turned a few more pages. The family is marked. I don't know since when. I don't know if it came from the earth, the forest, or the house my parents built on the old plot of land. She calls for blood. She wants an answer. It was the first time an origin story had emerged, even if vague. Something not of this world, something older than the house itself, something that recognized lineages, not people. The more we read, the worse it got. If I answer, she'll come in. If I ignore her, she'll come closer. If I run away, she'll wait. Then we come to the last page before the diary loses much of its text to water, mold, and wear. She took on my mother's voice. Then my wife's voice took over. Now she calls me by the name of my little daughter. It's not a voice. It's hunger. Emily dropped the diary on the floor. Grace, does this mean it's been haunting my family for over 100 years? I couldn't lie. Try. She ran her hands over her face, breathing unevenly. What is that thing? She asked, looking at me as if I could offer some concrete answer. But all I knew came from fragments, rumors, and what I had already seen. I don't know what she is, Emily, but I know what she does. She imitates. She calls out. And when someone answers, my voice trembled. I remembered her grandfather talking to himself in the backyard, answering murmurs that no one else could hear. Emily looked at the diary on the floor. She always called people by name before taking them. Always, for generations. I wanted to say that there was some way to break this cycle, but there was nothing in the diary to suggest it. No ritual, no defense mechanism, no escape. The only thing that was clear was the most terrifying part. She follows the blood, and the only thing that brings her closer faster, that's when someone responds. After we found the Hawthorne ancestors' diary, Emily began to avoid certain rooms in the house. She avoided looking out the upstairs windows, avoided walking down the hallway at night, and even avoided going near her grandfather's bedroom door. It was as if the house was full of holes through which something was watching, and she knew it. But the worst part wasn't the objects, the walls, or the noises. It came when the things started using what Emily loved. One quiet afternoon, I was pruning my plants when I heard my cell phone vibrate. It was a message from her. Grace, can you come here? I think I heard my mother's voice. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. I crossed the street without thinking. When Emily opened the door, her eyes were red, not from crying, but from shock. She pulled me inside and pointed to the hallway. I was looking through her photos in my room, and Grace, I heard my mother's voice calling me. It only happened once, but it was her. It was the same tone, the same manner. I held his shoulders. Emily, that's not your mother. You know that. She put her hand to her forehead, trembling. But Grace, what if it's just my mind? What if I'm just tired? What if I'm trying to hear something I've missed? No, I replied firmly. That's what she does. What she's always done. Her grandfather listened to his wife's voice. Her ancestor listened to her mother's voice. She uses what hurts the most. Emily swallowed hard. And then, as if something inside her had broken, she began to tell something she had never said before. Grace, last night I heard my mother's voice for the second time. But it wasn't calling. It was speaking, as if she was sitting next to me on the bed. She said, Emily, honey, look at me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Did you look? I asked. No, she replied, but there was hesitation in her voice. I closed my eyes tightly. But then she said something else. She took a deep breath as if it would be difficult even to repeat. She said, Why are you afraid of me? My stomach turned to ice. That phrase was not a call. It was manipulation. "Grace," she continued, "didn't sound like a strange voice trying to trick me. It sounded like her. It sounded like my mother. I felt longing." The voice sounded sad, almost crying, as if she were begging me to answer. The house was silent while she spoke. No creaking, no wind, nothing, as if she were listening. "That's how she gets to people," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She doesn't come as a monster. She comes as a memory, as affection, as the last thing you want to lose." Emily pressed her hands against her face, trembling. "Grace, she called my name 3 times. 3. Just like the diary said. Just like my grandfather heard. And then she said the phrase I most feared hearing. I felt like responding. I felt like crying right then. Because when a person reaches that point, it's not just fear anymore. It's a rupture. It's the house coming down through the emotional cracks that the person tries to hide from the whole world." I held her hands tightly. "Emily, listen. It doesn't matter what you hear. It doesn't matter how familiar the voice sounds. It doesn't matter if it's a whisper, conversation, laughter, crying, or if it sounds like your mother asking for help. Don't answer. Never answer." She looked at me with wide eyes, filled with tears that had been held back. "What if she doesn't stop, Grace? What if she keeps imitating my mother?" I took a deep breath. "So she's close, and something close always wants to be attended to." After the day, Emily admitted she felt the urge to answer the voice. The house felt different. It was no longer just a place to lurk. The atmosphere seemed tilted, as if every wall was bent toward her, as if the whole house had sensed that the moment was near. The household knew she was getting weaker. The night before the confrontation, something happened that I will never forget. Around 3 a.m, the same time her grandfather used to walk restlessly, I heard a sound that seemed like someone dragging their fingers along the wooden exterior wall, slowly, as if marking the path to Emily's room. I lay paralyzed in my own bed, clutching the phone, too afraid to call her, afraid that if I did, whatever was on the other end would answer first. The next morning, when I finally went to the house, Emily opened the door with a blank stare, as if she hadn't slept, as if she were being pulled into something only she could hear. "Grace, I think I need to see the basement." My blood ran cold. The basement was the only place in the house where no one had entered since her grandfather. He always said that's where her voice sounded strongest. He said that when he called her from there, it felt like the very ground was alive. "Emily, no," I managed to whisper. "Not there." But she shook her head. "I need to know what's in there. She called me tonight." It wasn't a whisper. It was conversation. She called me by my full name, Grace. Emily Ann Hawthorne. No one has called me that since my mother. I wanted to hold her back, to stop her, but there was something in her gaze, a mixture of fear and attraction, that I recognized immediately. The house was inside her, not in her body, in her thoughts, in her memory. The organization knew exactly where to strike. We descended to the basement door. The wood seemed to throb beneath our feet. Emily gripped the doorknob with a trembling hand, breathing as if preparing for a deep dive. I almost yelled at her to stop. When the door opened, a smell of old dampness rose, mixed with something metallic. The air inside was colder than the rest of the house. The dim lamp illuminated only the first few steps. The rest was dense shadow. "Emily, please," I pleaded. "Don't go downstairs." She didn't answer. And that was the worst part, because her lips moved as if trying to form words. But none came out. It was as if she were fighting an impulse that wasn't hers. He took the first step. The wood creaked. The lamp flickered. "Emily," I whispered, holding on to the handrail. She went down 2 more steps, and then stopped. She stood motionless, staring down into the basement, to a place I couldn't see from the doorway. And that's when it happened. From the midst of the darkness, a voice came, Clara, low, dragged, using exactly her mother's tone. "Emily, daughter, look at me." Emily let out a short sob, as if she had suffered an emotional shock. Her shoulders trembled. One step, another. She descended each step like someone hypnotized, guided by something she knew intimately, but which no longer existed. The light on the staircase went out completely. "Emily!" I tried to turn on my flashlight, but the phone wouldn't respond. The screen flickered, froze, the air became heavy, almost impossible to breathe. And then the voice changed. It came out in her mother's mold, and it became something older, deeper, closer. Emily! This time he didn't call as requested. He called him as the owner. She took the final step to the bottom. I heard her feet touch the concrete, and then silence. A silence so dense it felt like it had weight. A living silence. And it was in that silence that I realized she was no longer fighting against the presence. She was attending to someone. At that moment, when Emily disappeared into the darkness of the basement, I knew that if I went down after her, it would mean 2 deaths in the same night. It wasn't cowardice. It wasn't a lack of courage. It was instinct. Something primal saying, between your step and hers, there's a difference. She's blood of the house. You're not. But the silence that followed was so profound that it seemed to drown out the sound of the rain outside. I remained at the top of the stairs, my hand on the railing, trying to hear any noise, breathing, movement, touch, any sign that Emily was still conscious. Nothing. Minutes passed, or perhaps seconds. It's difficult to measure time when terror is so close. It feels like it's touching your skin. Then, coming from the depths of the basement, I heard a single sound, a sigh. But it wasn't human. It was like air being sucked too quickly through something that shouldn't have lungs. And then, the voice. But not her mother's voice, nor the soft imitation she had been using days before. Now it was something distorted, too full, as if composed of many voices at once, all whispering in overlapping layers. "Emily," she answered. I heard her answer with a clarity that crushed me inside. Low, fragile, almost childish. "Mommy?" The ground seemed to move. The house shook in an almost imperceptible way, but noticeable enough to make me grip the doorframe. It was as if the structure was satisfied, as if I had waited for that moment for years. Then something happened that I will never forget. The basement light flickered for half a second, not long enough to illuminate, but enough to capture a silhouette in the background. A slender shape, taller than any person of flesh and blood, hunched over, with arms too long, like shadows stretched by the wrong angle of the light. And in front of that shape, I saw Emily, with her back to me, standing there, completely still, as if he were listening, as if it were following. And before I could call her name, the light went out again, and I heard a sharp sound, like something gasping for air. Only this time, it was Emily. A sob, but not a cry. "Delivery! Emily!" I shouted, finally breaking the paralysis and descending 2 steps. But then the house responded. Not with a voice, not in a whisper, with an impact. The entire basement echoed with a dry thud, like wood being twisted beyond its limit. The front door slammed shut behind me, and darkness rose from the stairs like smoke. Hot, dense, almost solid. It enveloped me so completely that I had to retreat, rushing up the steps until I reached the living room again. From then on, nothing more human was heard down there. Only the sound of the wind passing through the cracks, only the sound of the house breathing. And after a long time, slow steps climbing the stairs, steps that weren't hers. I ran out, not as a frightened woman, but as someone who understands that she is sharing space with something that has chosen its victim, and that refuses to be interrupted. I called Emily for hours from outside. I texted. I sent messages. The police came the next day, but nobody wanted to go down to the basement. Nobody had the courage. The official explanation was sudden disappearance. But I know. I've seen enough. Emily didn't leave that house. She was outlet inside it. And the worst part of all this, since that night something has changed on the street. On cold, windy days, when I pass by the front door of the house, sometimes I hear whispers coming from the cracks, climbing up the wood. But now they no longer use her mother's voice. Now it's Emily's voice, calling my name. Emily's disappearance shook Willow Creek in a way I hadn't seen since her grandfather's death. The news spread quickly. Young woman mysteriously disappears from old family home. The local police conducted a cursory search, took statements, photographed the property. put up yellow tape at the entrance. All very routine. But nobody stayed there long enough to really search. The officers didn't say it aloud, but I saw it in their eyes. Fear. Irrational, instinctive fear. The same fear every resident feels when passing by that house after sunset. The final report was dry, objective, cold as always. Missing person. Last known location. Hawthorne family residence. They didn't mention the twisted basement door. They didn't register the cracking noises coming from the ground when they tried to go down. They failed to note that the body camera recording of one of the police officers had 5 minutes of heavy interference, precisely when he approached the stairs. Willow Creek began to breathe slowly again after that. But the street where the house is located never returned to normal. The surrounding vegetation seems drier. The air is colder, even in summer. The house remains officially locked, but passers-by say they sometimes see light upstairs, always from the same window, the window that belonged to Emily's mother's bedroom. As for me, well, I tried to move on with my life. I try every day, but there are things you can't silence. There are nights when I wake up without knowing why, and they all have the same detail. The wind stops, the leaves stand still, the house next door becomes so silent it seems to hold its breath, and then, very quietly, as if my face were pressed against the wall that divides our houses, I hear, "Grace." The first time it happened, I thought it was a dream. Today, I know it's not. The voice doesn't sound like Emily's mother's. It doesn't sound like Grandpa's. It doesn't sound like anything that would come from a living person. It's Emily's own voice. But this is not the Emily I knew. This is not the Emily who smiled as a child, who returned here with a heavy suitcase and hope in her eyes. It's an empty version, dragged, hungry. I blocked my front door, put furniture against the windows, but I know none of that matters. When the thing chooses someone, walls don't hold it back. Distance doesn't hold it back. Silence doesn't hold it back. In her ancestor's diary, there was a sentence that has never left my head. She follows the blood, but call those who bear witness. I witnessed it, and now, when the wind stops, when the floor gets cold, when the house next door gets too quiet, I know it won't be long. Because just like what happened with her grandfather, just like what happened to Emily herself, she is calling my name more clearly each day. The days following Emily's disappearance were shrouded in a heavy fog over Willow Creek. People spoke quietly, avoided looking directly at the Hawthorne house, and crossed the street to avoid walking on the sidewalk that touched its rusty fence. I tried to move on with my life, but I could never completely detach myself. A calling, not from the creature but from memory, kept me awake at night. Something was telling me that there were missing pieces, that Emily wasn't the first, that grandfather wasn't the first, that not even Jonathan Hawthorne, the ancestor whose diary we found in the attic, had told everything he knew. On the 4th night after her disappearance, I made a decision that, to this day, I don't know if it was courage or stupidity. I went inside the house, not through the front door. That one was sealed off by the police. I entered through the 2nd floor window, one that I knew had never locked properly. The air inside the house was colder than the night outside, an ancient cold trapped in the wood. I climbed the stairs slowly, and then I noticed something I had never seen in 20 years of living next door to the Hawthorne family. A door that looked like it had been placed inside the wall. It wasn't new, nor was it old enough to be part of the original structure. It was hidden, a narrow door with an old lock, and for the first time the house seemed too quiet, as if it were watching. Forcing the door open with her shoulder, she gave way. What I found behind her was not a room. It was an office that was not included in the house plans. Antique table, shelves full of notebooks, records, papers tied together with old string. A clock stopped at 2:17 a.m. Pictures turned towards the wall as if someone didn't want to look at their own dead. And in the center of the table, a stack of diaries, all dated between 1890 and 1974, all written by members of the Hawthorne family. I trembled when I opened the first one. The Diary of Jonathan Hawthorne, 1887. There was more than we found in the attic. Pages torn out, crossed out texts, despair transformed into calligraphy, and then, finally, the first description of the creature. It doesn't have a fixed shape. Sometimes it's a double shadow. Sometimes it's an elongated body, like something trying to learn how to be human. Where there should be a face, there is only depth, eyes that are holes, hands that drag whatever they touch. I slammed the diary shut, but curiosity, or perhaps fate, made me open the second one. Mary Hawthorne, 1932, Emily's great-grandmother. Her lines were softer, but filled with silent pain. She first appears as a voice, then like weight in the air, and when it appears as a body, it looks like it's made of shadows that have learned to mimic the shape of a living being. Too long, too thin, too quiet, and yet as present as someone breathing beside you. My hands were trembling. I opened the third diary. Arthur Hawthorne, 1964, Emily's grandfather, the man who died inside the house. She learns from each generation. She observes what frightens her, and it changes to become that, an old hunger that just won't go away. Don't look directly at it when it takes shape, because she sees it as an invitation. This is when I realized no one before me had survived long enough to gather all these descriptions. And then, underneath everything, I found a drawing, handmade, an outline of something elongated, curved with long arms that almost touched the ground, with the void where the face should be filled with repeated strokes, as if someone were trying to erase what they saw, but couldn't remove it from their mind. And at that moment, the house became too quiet. I felt the wood beneath my feet vibrate slightly, as if something were rising on the floor below, as if he had noticed my presence, as if it were going up. I quickly closed all the diaries, put them back where they were, and left the office. As I walked down the hallway, I heard, not with my ears, but with my body, a deep breath coming from the first floor, a slow sound, an old sound, a personal sound. I ran to the window I had entered through and left the house before the sound reached the stairs. Since that night, I haven't gone back there. But now I know something I didn't know before. I know what she's like, and I know that she knows that I know, which means that someday, at some point, she will come to finish what she started with Emily.